Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Canon podcast, your home on the Star Wars Underworld network for in-depth discussion on lore, the High Republic, and the whole of the galaxy far, far away. My name is Joel. I'm coming to you live from Underworld, Orange County. Matthew's still on vacation, but he'll be back in September, so don't you worry, folks. All right. Remember, folks, the first and only reality of the ancient Sith. There can only be one Dark Lord at a time. And this time we talk about the rise of those Dark Lords. Yep, that's right. We're doing Tales of the Jedi again. And again, to talk about this epic comic book series, I have brought my friend yours, Mr. Red Leader Antilles. How you doing?
Good. Excited to talk about this after finally getting around to reading the latter part of this arc.
Ooh, is this a first time read for you?
Yeah, I only ever was able to get the first issue at my local comic book store.
Oh wow. Awesome. Awesome. That's great. As always, you can follow us at the Ion Cannon Pod. Get the banners up. Follow us at Ion Cannon Pod. And be on the lookout for Tractor Beam this Wednesday because Matthew will be previewing. He will be on that, and he will be previewing his time for Fan Expo Canada. So he'll be there this week, and hopefully he'll have lots of stuff to preview and lots of stuff to talk about after the event. So exciting. Yay, Fan Expo. Yay. All right, let's get into the week of Star Wars. And for this week of Star Wars, as Red is here and he has mentioned that he is a fan of Tor, I've always gotten to wonder about Tor as I thought about the game, of how much it really is a culmination of, Tales of the Jedi, Knights of the Old Republic, all that good stuff, etc., etc. And Red, I gotta ask you, as someone who's been now going back to Tales of the Jedi, and I don't know if you've how much you recently reread KOTOR or not, or not reread, replayed KOTOR. How does Tor, the Old Republic MMO game, for anybody who doesn't know what I'm talking about, feel as a payoff to so many of the various arcs and stuff, to kind of everything Tales of the Jedi sets up and has been talking about? Like, how in your opinion, did it work for you?
Well, I know that a lot of KOTOR purists were upset with stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but from the Tales of the Jedi fan perspective,
Mm-hmm.
I think it did the best job it could with
Mm-hmm.
KOTOR's tone and everything being way more popular and
Mm-hmm.
being a video game following directly on from that popularity and everything.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I think it incorporates Tales of the Jedi elements well enough. It
Mm-hmm.
captures some of the tone when you get that stuff. Like there is a decent amount of like Nomi Sunrider stuff and the Jedi portions.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, even if it is more based on like prequel Jedi and a lot of the structure, but like there's a decent amount of
Yeah.
send ups to that era, and it doesn't like do anything that I would consider slander, like what a lot of
No.
Revan fans feel happened with Revan and Tor.
Yeah. For me, I have a very interesting relationship with Tor. I mean, I've never played the game itself, so I kind of have to. I always kind of like. I never want to be too harsh on something I've never played. I just watch walkthroughs and keep up with the storyline. Tor is interesting for me because, like, I'm okay with it, like in a vacuum. But it's always kind of odd to be kind of trying to splice it in with the rest of the Star Wars expanded universe of Legends at the time. Not that I think it like breaks anything or anything. It's just like there's just so much that goes on, especially after once you start getting to like the Eternal Empire, the
Mm-hmm.
cool stuff. Although they brought back not Darth Nihilus, he's beforehand. Uh,
Malgus.
Darth Malgus again, so that's kind of interesting. Honestly, my issues with some of the choices made have always just more been aesthetics. I'm not a big fan of the Sith Empire just being Galactic Empire with more Sith Lords in it. That's always been a weird one for me. Um, Especially because I feel like the Revan Sith Empire, you can make that argument for that, but to me that kind of works because at least they retroactively say, oh, Revan Sith Empire just the corrupted Republic and Jedi, so you can almost make the argument like, oh, it's kind of like the Empire because the Galactic Empire is just the Republic corrupt, at its worst form. Um, So there's that. I have no issue with the rebel stuff, and I do think it does play a little bit into. I mean, obviously they do set up what's going to happen with the Mandalorian Wars being manipulated by the true Sith and all that stuff. So it's always more of an aesthetic choice for me, and kind of like the Sith, the bad guy just in the Jedi. The Jedi are a little too armory, and the Sith are a little too empire-y. But that's like my problem. But it's like it's not bad. It's just like oh, a little disappointing.
I think Alderaan is the point where you really get Tales of the Jedi aesthetics, especially with like the uniforms and everything. Like they have like ceremonial spears and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
They have very medieval architecture. The politics are kind of like the Alderaan stuff. It's nice.
Yeah. So yeah, that's kind of just my overall thoughts on Tor. I mean, I'm still a good game, and I'm glad fans have it to play and stuff. No real news this week to deal with at the moment. Outlaws will be coming out in August 30th. But that's about it. So let's get right into it. Let's get right into Tales of the Jedi, Dark Lords of the Sith. That's right. Get into Dark Lords of the Sith, the next arc in the Tales of the Jedi series, and very much the true continuation of everything we kind of been reading to up to this point. This is where Kevin J. Anderson enters the fray as the co-writer for this arc, and I checked to make sure as we bring in elements from uh, Jedi Academy trilogy as well. And this is where things really start to get heat up, and this is where things start to really get big. And long story short, for me, I'll just give my general impressions. This is my favorite arc. This is my legit favorite arc of all the Tales of the Jedi. Just something about it. It just the story I think is the most tight. It's the most compelling. Um, it really starts setting up the Sith as we will kind of know them. I want to say this is the first time we see Korriban, but I think that's the first time we see Korriban, so I might be wrong on that. And this is just it just gets really interesting and really big. But Red, as this is your first time kind of reading through the whole arc now from beginning to end, what were your initial thoughts on it, especially the first time?
It's like off the bat has way more going on
Mm-hmm.
than the other arcs.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Also, yes, this is the first appearance and mention of Korriban. I checked.
Okay.
Uh, but yeah, it feels like it has the most to say out of all of them. It's like the first arc is kind of just two different stories compiled into one. Freedom Night Uprising is wrapping stuff up more
Mm-hmm.
so. This has the most obvious thematic through line, has something it's actually really trying to say consistently throughout.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and we'll get into it. There is a lot of really well done. You have the obvious. Oh, it's like poetry. It rhymes, but then there's some like genuinely really good storytelling here, and like contrasting Ulick and Exar's stories, and doing some interesting character work that you don't get with the other stuff as much. We really get to dive into, especially Exar. You can tell they just really enjoy the psychology of that character.
Oh, absolutely. I can just read it off the page. I think it really is. I think this episode, not this episode, well, this episode we'll talk about it. This comic, I think, in terms of a theme, very much is you know the nature of evil and studying evil, and in a lot of ways, by doing so, you can become evil. um, and just the corroding nature of the dark side. Um, you can. I really do want. I do think this is a really good partnership between Veitch and Anderson, which I sadly wasn't able to get a lot of behind the scenes stuff, but it's really cool. Maybe Red, do you know if why Tale of the Jedi decided, hey, let's expand upon Jedi Academy stuff, which I think came
So
beforehand.
Sort of. So Anderson got into this stuff with Dark Horse because his agent, no, a friend of his who was at Dark Horse asked him to do an introduction for
Mm-hmm.
the paperback for the trade paperback for Dark Empire,
Mm-hmm.
and he hadn't read it, but he was interested, so he did the introduction after reading it and enjoying it.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and obviously he had worked somewhat with Zahn, I think, as well. He talks a lot in interviews about uh, talking with like Kathy Tyers and uh, the writer for uh, was it not Planet of is it Planet of Twilight? Yeah, Planet of
Yeah.
Twilight. And with Zahn and everyone like constantly collaborating with people on the phone and stuff, trying to fit stuff together. And so he seeks out Veitch because he wants to just interact. He wants to know about uh like he hasn't read comics, but he's kind of interested, and so he's curious about it. He talks to Veitch, and they're explaining their stories to each other. And he says here in an interview with Wikipedia, I mentioned that it just so happened much of my Jedi Academy storyline hinged on the spirit of a long dead Dark Lord of the Sith, Exar Kun, who had died thousands of years earlier. As we talked, we both realized that the story of Exar Kun fit perfectly into Tom's ideas for further Tales of the Jedi issues, so we decided to do it together. Originally mapped out as a single 12-issue epic, but for practical reasons split into two 6-issue halves.
Interesting. I wonder if that explains why Anderson goes solo for the next arc in a weird way. I don't think Veitch
Yes,
is on the next
he
one.
explains why Veitch is missing. The, so I believe he's working on uh Dark, Dark Empire 2 is advertised in the back of these issues.
Oh, that's cool.
Uh so yeah, he had other projects to work on, so I tackled the Sith War solo. Uh
Okay.
and so then he gets involved with Dario Carrasco as the artist, and they do a lot of the plotting because according to Anderson, also Gossett, the artist for the first 5 issues of this, was heavily involved in the plotting. Like the three of them were always splitting creative duties.
Interesting. Well, that explains why the next two arcs, this one and the next one, very much feel almost like their own separate thing compared to the last three that we kind of read together. And almost like this, almost like a half thing, where it's like I feel like when we finished up Freedom Nat Uprising, that was the first half, and now we're on the second half. So that makes
Yeah,
a lot of sense.
Veitch was already planning a 12-issue kind of big bad. Like he wanted, like Ansar Troon is Anderson's character, but essentially the role is something that Veitch had come up with, like the main thrust of the plot. They sort of
Interesting.
merged that because he was building to. I mean, he sets it up with Freedom Night Uprising. He was building to this larger dark side conflict and the Sith being more heavily involved.
Right. I wonder if he was. I wonder if that was Freedom Nat himself, or if he was going to set up a new just dark sider. I mean, Ula Caldroma clearly was being set up for a fall,
Mm-hmm.
so maybe it would have been Caldroma himself that that was the big bad. But let's talk about the world building of this comic, because I think if there's, I mean, I love the character stuff, and we'll definitely get to that. But I think if there's one thing I love about this, and you can tell Veitch and Anderson were having a ball, it's the world building. Like there is very much a lot of beginning hints of like the Great Hyperspace War, Naga Sadow. This is the first mention of Naga Sadow from an outer universe standpoint, even though we did Dark Lord, I mean not Dark Lords, Rise and Fall of Sith Empire earlier. Because we did a chronological order. Obviously, we see Korriban for the first time, the Temple of the Sith. About to talk about Freedom Nad and like his kind of journey to the dark side. But overall, like, what do you think of like the world building for this entire arc?
It's interesting because you can definitely see stuff starting to come together. Like there are some big contradictions between this and Golden Age and Gold Age and Fall of the Sith Empire,
Right.
uh, especially with Naga Sadow. But the push for connective tissue is already beginning. I mean, we opened during the aftermath of the Great Hyperspace War, and it's framed sort of differently. Uh,
Mhm.
and it has a pretty different conflict, which gets expanded on later by the Old Republic
Right.
and its prelude stuff. Explain
Hmm.
that and doing a good job of that, honestly. But uh, yeah, there's also a bunch of little details that I really enjoy that I think show that Veitch was interested in maybe part of the medieval design stuff from the previous arcs was intentional, or he was very aware
Hmm.
of and trying to build to a point of changing that, because we get several points throughout this arc where characters point out that they're using archaic uh
Magic.
well, not even the magic, but the technology is
Hmm.
archaic and
Right.
outdated. Like
Hmm.
characters mention I was like Ulik reinvent is changing the Empress Teta system's cannons. Like their existing cannons are hundreds of years out of date. They're from the Great Hyperspace War. And Ulik is like, well, the Republic, you got to make them equivalent to the Republic's cannons. So they're
Right.
firing proper lasers. And uh, the warriors on the Empress Teta system, the foot soldiers for the craft, are described as using ceremonial and like outdated armor for the purpose of all this history stuff, and they're calling to a more ancient time. But as that conflict progresses, and we get the influence literally of ancient Sith and their spirits and like actual Sith magic and the literal descendants of the Sith species,
Right.
that actually pushes forward the technology. Like you have these sort of larpers being like, we're gonna use, like they're describing in that fight scene in the beginning of issue 2,
Hmm.
uh like the assault ships of the Krath are unique to the Titan system. Flying decks crammed with shock troops wearing ceremonial armor of an earlier time. After
Right.
centuries of peace, the Titan worlds have felt no need to adopt the modern weapons that are changing the face of war throughout the galaxy. And the
Hmm.
proud and fierce warrior classes of the Seven Worlds have continued to train with weaponry of a glorious earlier day. The Ten Warriors boast that their swords are a match for any hand weapon in the galaxy. Certainly against each other, neither side has a clear advantage. And then they start using the dark side magic and making them think their swords are snakes and stuff, and that changes the tide. And so that's this big deal, and the Jedi are freaking out just about that.
Hmm.
And in the background, Exar Kun is looking for actual, even more ancient stuff. And once that gets introduced, once Ulik, a fallen Jedi, I'm both are fallen Jedi, but one Ulik brings modern tactics and like defensive technology into the game, and then Exar uses ancient Sith, not just calling on Sith magics, but always progressing or using them in not just LARPy ways. Like he continues the research of Naga Sadow, and creates super soldier Masasi warriors. And that merges, and so the craft and these LARPing stuff falls away, and in its place are the true Sith,
Hmm.
and it's fallen Jedi with all of the modern Jedi and Republic stuff and tactics and political experience, and the ancient Sith not just calling to an earlier time, but actually moving forward all of that. And so you sort of have this dichotomy between the craft and even the Jedi to a point, and where the galaxy is heading.
Right. No, I agree. I love stuff like that. And one thing I did when reading this, and you mentioned earlier about like a little bit of the contradictions and stuff about the world building. I like looked for stuff just to kind of see like, okay, what still more or less fits, and what more or less kind of like you see like, oh, that changed. Naga Sadow, seems like it was the one that changed a little bit the most. Weirdly, between this arc and the next arc, I actually looked ahead to the next arc, and they said some things about the Tao, because here, and I wrote it down, they said Sadow was a member of a priesthood of pure-blood Sith who were rebelling against their fallen Jedi, who were the title of Dark Lords. I found that interesting. And that's actually something that always kind of confused me. It's like, what is a pure-blood Sith and what is a Dark Lord? It's like, is a pure-blood Sith just like the Korriban native race, and then the Dark Lords are just the fallen Jedi? It could be anybody. It could be a Twi'lek, or a human, and then like they're just fallen Jedi. Like, is that what required to be a Dark Lord? You have to be a fallen Jedi. Like that. That always got me a little bit.
I think that's the implication here for sure.
Yeah, that's how I've always viewed it. But I'm curious, but how did you feel reading this in terms of those early kind of hints and what we see are going to be the contradictions moving forward? Did you wish they had stuck more with the intent, or do you think it's fine where they went with Golden Age and stuff?
I think it's interesting because Golden Age definitely does some neat stuff with the ambitions of the hybrid Sith, which Naga now becomes, which does carry this over from. Though it is funny that here it's very much Naga Sadow is pure blood ancient Sith, though he is also drawn as just a human,
Right. I
very
know.
clearly. He has like green eyes, he has pale skin, he has no face, like mandible, tentacle thingies.
And in the audio drama, he's Scottish.
Truly alien.
I know.
But like here he's described as a Sith magician a bunch, and representing the purebloods, who is in revolt against, and like very open revolt, and like seemingly like a consistent war with the Dark Lords of the Sith, who are described as, which I guess Dark Lord might as well always be sort of. I mean, I think Dark Lord was the title already for like the kings or whatever the Sith, but it really means like post the exiled Jedi arriving, whether it's a pureblood Sith, hybrid Sith, or just a human Jedi.
Right.
Dark Lord is part of that. But it is funny because obviously Naga Sadow, once we get his actual background, he's very much half. He's very much a hybrid human Sith. He's of the warrior class, and his main enemy is Ludo Kresh, who is a pureblood Sith and is a magician and is all about the old ways, which is an interesting conflict. But it's clear there's a different dichotomy here they're sort of playing with, of the Sith that Naga Sadow represents being sort of a more specifically oppressed group.
Right.
And that Naga Sadow comes from that, and that the Masasi are sort of
lower caste.
Yeah, and he sort of just continues that relationship with the Masasi, where he makes himself Dark Lord and just does the same stuff the Dark Jedi had done.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. I remember reading some forums about this stuff a while back, and I think someone brought up a good point. Like, the thing about Golden Age is Golden Age very much kind of focuses on a lot on what they called like the human political aspects of the Sith. Which is which is cool, but like you can kind of see like Yeah, I mean, obviously, yeah, they got that dark magic into the stuff, but like, it's a political drama between Ludo Kresh and Nog Sadao. It's like, hey, we gotta take our civilization this way, and no, we gotta take our civilization this way. While in this, especially, the Sith, the Dark Lords are very mystical. Especially when you get to the end. It's almost a bit larger than life, almost. Here as well. I also like looking at it in the terms of okay, I always like looking at this book, especially in terms of like, okay, looking at Dark Empire and looking at, the original trilogy and like, okay, maybe Dark Lords can only be fallen Jedi because ultimately, Vader was the Dark Lord of the Sith and he was technically a fallen Jedi. While the Emperor is just probably some force using aristocrat who just found Sith and Jedi teachings and taught himself the dark side, but maybe never considered himself a Dark Lord because he wasn't he wasn't a Jedi at first. Now, obviously, later stuff would change that. Of course, was Phantom Menace, obviously, and then the stuff that built off of that. But I just think it's kind of interesting looking at that dichotomy that way, which is something I like to do quite a bit. Um, another thing about the world building that you talked about. It does feel like, as you said, the galaxy moving forward. It also feels like the Jedi and Sith are in some ways moving forward. More the Sith, because in some ways I feel like by having XR and Ulik be the Dark Lords, I feel like, like I think it's something you said before, the Sith become less of a quote unquote a species, and it becomes that belief as Kreia would say as well. The Sith are a belief, where you don't have to necessarily be a Korrabani native. It's weird. Like in some ways, I feel like Ulik and XR are both returning the Sith to their roots, but also pushing it forward. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, in some way they're returning the Sith to their roots as dark Jedi who fell, and
Right.
not as. But it's funny because at the same time, Naga Sadao is emphasized here as being in revolt against the Dark Jedi, who are the
Right.
Dark Lords, but he is the most important kind of influence on Exar at the end of the day, even more than Freed and Ad, even though they don't interact with each other. Like it's his work
Right.
that carries that on, and he is the cause for most of the bad stuff that happens throughout this, uh, even from Beyond the Grave. So it is kind of like he. I mean, I guess a lot of this arc is about usurping. So the Jedi arrive, they usurp the ruling of the Sith people, and then Naga Sadao usurps that and becomes the Dark Lord of the Sith
Hmm.
as a pureblood, which again obviously changes, but still the sort of idea is there.
Right.
And then these guys, Ulik, and Alimas, uh, usurp Satal, and then Ulik usurps from Alima, and then Ulik and Exar usurp the Republic, and then Exar usurps from Ulik, and then he dies.
Right. As it goes. Yeah, I think one thing about this book and this arc, and honestly the arc before it, is, as much as we're talking about the Sith and stuff like that, someone made a good point where I think Veitch in particular, I think Anderson probably goes the opposite way, sadly, especially with Golden Age. But I think Veitch, I think, is less interested in quote unquote the Sith as like an organization or a sect. I think what Veitch does in these comics, everything up to this point, is it's all about more the dark side and just the
Mm-hmm.
corroding nature. Where it's sort of like, like, yeah, you call yourself a Sith or a Dark Jedi. In the audio drama, they go back and forth on on both. But at the end of the day, it's all about the dark side and being corrupted by it. It doesn't matter what you are. You can be a noble or a dark Jedi, but you're still a dark sider.
Yeah, and they do sort of talk about like the war on the craft, even when the Sith come up, that the war on the craft is this cult is
Mhm.
secondary to the fight with the dark side. Like they can wipe out the craft cultists and even their leadership, but the dark side sort of essence they're spreading will continue. And that's what Ulik is scared of.
Oh, actually, yeah, and that's something interesting. But we'll get to Uluk in a bit because one more thing I want to talk about is I want to talk about the Jedi themselves and the world building because I think this is interesting. Look at the Jedi. I mean, this whole thing has been an interesting look at the Jedi for sure. But this is interesting because it's sort of like this is the first time we kind of see the Jedi on a more galactic scale. Like they have the big conclave. There's that word, conclave. And there is hints of a council, but it's clearly not the council that we will know in the prequels. And I was just curious, Brad, what are your thoughts on like the world building for the Jedi and how they're portrayed here in this, especially in this arc, where you kind of see them more on a galactic scale than just a little bit local.
Yeah, it's interesting. The Jedi are sort of they're treated as a separate organization that gets called upon by the Republic for stuff. They're more scattered. Like it's a major point where that giant Jedi and Republic joint task force attacks
Right.
at Daniba, and you have that like giant capital ship that is incredibly cool. I love that thing. Uh, and you have these Jedi that are called upon from all these different places, and there's a big emphasis made at points on the Jedi Order coming together at all being a pretty big deal. Uh,
Right.
and so like while that's going on, uh, the Jedi have their own conference, like you were saying, and that is really neat. Uh, that we have like pretty much every Jedi in the galaxy being gathered together to discuss this. There are like obvious elders among them, but
Mm-hmm. Master
there
Archive.
isn't really a proper order. There isn't like a clear chain of command. There's just elder Jedi who exists, and so they have that meeting on Mount Meru. Uh, and yeah, that line I was trying to find it. So Master Oda and the respected spokesman, has presided over Jedi assemblies for 6 centuries, uh, implying sort of the Jedi have assemblies, not a council, uh, and they're like general assemblies. And I don't know if it's like every century or every couple of years or whenever there's a crisis, but it is definitely scattered, and it goes back to, and we'll get this even more so in the next arc, to my theory of sort of the Jedi operating like Doctor Who
Oh, right.
regenerations, where they
Right.
don't have a clear structure and there's not like a chain of command really, and so they're able to get escape pods crashing on top of them and wiping out like half the order, and the elder Jedi aren't able to well, they're not technically Ulick's master or anything, so they can't stop him from obviously going to the dark side and saying he's going to go to the dark side. And so it's like, yeah, obviously, like we look at KOTOR,
Mm-hmm.
and there's this vibe, and part of it is just
Prequels route.
partially that, but also like KOTOR 2, there is definitely the anti-Jedi bias from the writer, who's been accused of just hating Star Wars in general, which I don't think is completely fair, but he definitely isn't the has his serious criticisms and everything. And so the Jedi sort of operate in a way that is obvious to make them negative, make them bad guys. They the whole Republic Mandalore Wars conflict gets rearranged in a way that is very unsympathetic to the Jedi. Even more so than KOTOR 1. Like there's an actual discussion to be had there. You can have with Karth that conversation a couple of times, but KOTOR 2 kind of changes that. But this, in the context of Tales of the Jedi, it's not exactly crazy because the council seems to be newly formed of people who either were involved as young knights during this period or their masters were.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like it's understandable that they would be super hesitant about starting another conflict with the Mandalorians, and that they would worry about a Jedi saying, "No, no, no, I'm gonna go off and warmonger, but it will turn out all right this time." It's like it's literally what Ulick said, and that didn't turn out well. The Jedi disobeying and going off on their own to do military stuff is how the whole Exar Kun War happens.
Right.
And
It's
so in
like,
that context, the Order being like, no, 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 we have set roles, and you have to get approval for stuff. They seem like stick in the muds, but it's like makes sense in the context of what happened 30 years prior.
yeah, I mean, you can't be doing that kind of stuff all the way. No, I agree. I think in terms of like looking at it all from a, because I've been doing kind of like two things with this book, reading it, as I do with a lot of especially prequel '90s Star Wars. Is I like to look at it both from what was the intent of the world building at the time, because that's kind of fun. It's like when you read the Thrawn trilogy and they're like the clones were the enemies and blah 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 blah. But also I kind of do look at especially stuff like this and look at it like, okay, yeah, I think you're right, Red, in terms of like how to retroactively kind of make it all one cohesive universe. Just like, yeah, this war shook things up in a way where it's like, yeah, I think maybe we could probably have some rules. And when our boy Ulick is like, I'm gonna infiltrate the Sith, that's totally gonna work. I don't see any problem at all with this plan. They're gonna be like, yeah, we need to control our Jedi a little bit more because everyone that goes crazy, and then it's all downhill for the galaxy. Um,
And then he's murdering the freaking Chancellor in the middle of the Senate chamber. It doesn't work out well.
Yeah, that's why the Jedi eventually need to hire a PR person, along with other things. But no, you're absolutely right, and I agree with it as well. Before we get into our big two of Ulick and Exar Kun, let's get into the cousins themselves, Alima and Satal. And oh boy, are they're continuing to not prove to themselves that they certainly aren't in a more than just cousins. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. But no, I do think it's interesting looking at, especially the artwork, making them look less. They become almost more scary as they get their dark side magic. They come off less as like snobbish little brats that you want to just slap, and now they're just like, oh, they're just psychopaths. Which I mean, they always were psychopaths, but now they're like psychopaths who like are getting more scary looking, and like you get these lines into their eyes and whatnot. But and that whole thing, and of course, they're doing weird magic to their dad and their tutor. It's like, oh gosh, Joffrey Baratheon, eat your heart out. But yeah, what do you think of the cousins this issue?
Yeah, the worm out of the turning his tongue into a worm is horrifying. And he comes back and they've sewed his mouth shut, and then they just incinerate him later. It's like it's really neat, and that the interplay going on uh, with their parents, but also the way they talk about the sort of economic situation with the Empress Teta system, and how once Empress Teta herself opens it up, uh, you have this aristocratic authority and this power sharing agreement with commercial interests that develop the carbonite mines, and there's conflict there between those interests, and they're both very unsympathetic and being scheming with each other or scheming against each other as well, constantly trying to one up. Like that's obviously a setup for what we see between Satal and Alima moving forward, what we see between uh Exar and Ulick, what we see between Exar and Fried and Nad, like that, opening pages of the story proper past the Nargis Satal flashback, uh, we're already setting up that thing of these, self-serving, evil groups stabbing each other in the back or having these conflicts, even though they both need each other to gain power. It's never enough. And so the aristocracy is corrupt. the mining guild is corrupt. But they, they're killing each other for their slight gains, or because of, they feel, the kids feel slighted by their parents. Uh, and the mining guild guys are referring to them as children. Like, why are you asking for an inspection, to do an inspection tour? Like, they're all just spiteful, petty people. It's very fun seeing that contrast with, like the huge power of the Sith.
Mm-hmm. No, it's really interesting. I wonder if I wonder if in some ways Veitch was almost doing his own prequel thing, which was like dark magic and corporations get together and they make an empire. This was his like take on that, but he couldn't actually tell the prequels because that was not the whether that wasn't allowed at the time. So no, I think that's cool, and the whole Empress. I love how it's like the Empress Tita system conflict is almost like the Separatist crisis before the Clone Wars begin, but with more violence in a
Mm-hmm.
way, right? To kind of go back to that, the Tales of the Jedi or the prequels um, of it all, kind of a situation. Because obviously, the smaller conflict eventually does lead into a much larger one that's going to engulf the whole galaxy. What did you make also of the use of just the Sith magic in general? Like how very like almost full on magic is. Like we how just wild it is. Like people get tongues are getting turned into snakes, and there's even some moment where Lima's like summoning monsters just by moving her hands all around like that. What would you make of kind of that usage of the Force in that way?
Yeah, it's interesting because a lot of it from her is illusions, like the what do they call them? Like star grazers or whatever.
Yeah, I remember that
The
because where they she summons monsters and Nomi is like, you gotta um you gotta outthink it.
Yeah, which makes them think there's like giant space amoeba things uh attacking them, which feels super Purrgil. It's really neat. The space grazers. Uh
Yeah.
like they say, like, these legendary creatures are said to have once roamed between the stars, preying on galactic space traffic. And it's like, okay, yeah, these are Purrgils, or those amoeba eaters from the bomber episode in season 1 of TCW,
Oh
that
yeah.
for the longest time I thought were just the Purrgils, because I didn't watch the first Purrgil episode, because
Oh
I was like,
yeah.
well, oh, I guess that's just they changed the design. But a lot of it is not real,
Mhm.
but you do get the neat tactical moments where, which also shows Satal as not just kind of the idiot one. He is pretty smart. Like,
Mhm.
he knows Nomi will, okay, they're breaking through some of these, so he has them send out an illusion of a bunch of chaos fighters, as they're calling them. These, little attack. They're not exactly like snub fighters. They're like gunship
Mhm.
things, uh, troop carriers, I think, as well. But they're sending those out, and Nomi breaks the illusion, and they let their guard down, and then, oh, within there is, within like the thousands of fighters, there's
Right.
a couple hundred really elite ones that are real, and they strike, and it's really effective. And that's, we get to see some actual shrewd tactical stuff from him as well. Uh, and we get that match between, the illusion side of these magics and of force powers, and the the actual application, which is sort of where
Mhm.
Exar comes in, because she's creating like Alima's creating these illusions of monsters, and then Exar is fighting against an actual giant worm mutant monster that Nagasadao made, and he's creating hybrid, or not hybrid, but like super soldier Sith Masasi guys, and
Right.
Alima like I think tries to hit Nomi with like a fireball thing at one point that doesn't do much, and then when Exar enters at the end of the first the last issue, he just yeets her across the room with a laser beam from his hand that he like just figured out how to do, and it's like you getting to see this difference between the Sith magics as illusion versus
The real deal.
uh yeah yeah
I one thing I've always wondered, and this is again, and we'll talk about this more when we talk about Dark, if we ever talk about Dark Empire, is um I genuinely wonder in Veitch's head. This is where I think, considering how easily XR yeeted Alima, and it's like, no, this is the Dark Lord of the Sith. These are the real deal. I wonder if what Veitch thought of like the Emperor in comparison to these Dark Lords. Because I think of the scene from Empire's End where and I don't know if you ever read Empire's End, the comic, where Palpatine goes to Korriban. He's like, "Hey, ancient Sith spirits, heal my body because my clone's about to die, and I'm running out of clones here. Otherwise, I gotta steal a baby." And they're like, "Yeah, sorry, Palps, we can't do that. Also, you've only ruled the galaxy for centuries. We've been the Dark Lord for like not centuries, for like a couple decades. We're the Dark Lords of the Sith, so you're kind of a nothing to us." So I kind of always wonder if like if in like in the Veitch verse, as I'm going to call it, if Palpatine is more on the Alima Satal side of things compared to like an actual Dark Lord, and the only reason Vader is subservient because he got melted. But I don't know. What are your thoughts, if you have any?
maybe the Palpatine is also so absurdly powerful. I think part of it is maybe just I mean Palpatine does try and surpass those ancient Sith in a lot of ways, even back then. What with the cloning and everything, which I think
Mhm.
might kind of be part of it as well.
Right.
Like he isn't relying on his dark side stuff. He's which Sith alchemists weren't either, but he's so ambitious, so full of himself that on some level, I kind of feel like that moment
Mhm.
really is him being a Dark Lord of the Sith. That the other Sith are like, nah, spiting you,
I mean, that's true.
R.I.P. Bozo, ratioed. And it's like that feels so like, yeah, he is a Dark Lord of the Sith. Of course they're gonna be like, nope, not letting your legacy last longer.
Yeah, I mean, you're probably right. Like, I mean, that's what Sith Lords always do to each other. Like, I've never read Legacy all the way, but I know enough about it to know, like, there's a scene where Darth Krayt is, like, talking to, like, Ghost of the Sith Lords of old. I don't actually
He has
know.
all their holocrons.
Yes, they're holocrons, and they're like, yeah, dude, you're nothing, okay? But Darth Vader's like, you're breaking the rule of two. Darth Nihilus is like, yeah, dude, I've eaten planets. You're kind of a nothing. Even
Yeah,
then,
and then
Dead's like,
Endedu is there and he's just like brains. It's like, yeah, why
brain.
did we bring Endedu? It's like, oh right, he's the only one who figured out the uh essence transfer. So you just have to put up with this weirdo.
Right. So it's like, yeah, no, you're probably right. It's like, that's all ancient Dark Lords. They're like, they all hate each other, and they always try to like say, no, I'm a Dark Lord. You're not Dark Lord. No, we're Dark Lord. Although they were nice enough to say, hey, Vader's throne is empty. Vader didn't join us. You can join us in this throne. And Palpatine's like, no, I don't want to die. And then he will. Oh, by the way, also another world building thing is like, again, I do like, even from an early age, not early, yeah, early age in the sense of, uh, Siths are kind of also quasi mad scientists with and wizards at the same time. Mad alchemist science wizardry, which will then continue on with the Plagueis stuff, who's also mad science wizardry stuff. So that's a nice little pull from there, as well. So there's that. Um, but yeah, let's get into it, and let's start with Uluk, because Uluk's interesting in this one, because this is very much building off um the previous one, where you start to see the aggression and stuff, and there's already hints of him kind of following his fall, And it's interesting that once again, Veitch is doing what he did in Dark Empire, and maybe honestly better. Not that I don't believe Luke wouldn't have done this as well, but I think just with Luke, there's probably a lot more buildup, and the fact, he did have more. He had more issues to expand on this. Of Ulick is trying to infiltrate the dark side from within to take it down, and then becomes corrupted by it. I don't know if you've ever read Dark Empire in that storyline, but what do you make of Ulick's plan, just in terms of not being like a good plan, because it's not, but just in terms of like something a character would do? Do you buy it? Do you like it as just an idea with a fall?
Ulick is doing entryism, and he should be kicked out of the organization, and no one should associate with him. This is classic entryism. Read oh god, I can't even think of like a major work on. He is essentially doing entryism though, like trying. Well, he's not trying to change from the inside. Well, entryism isn't really either. He's trying to get in the organization. He is very vague, and he really doesn't have a plan. He's just like, I think there are secrets that we won't be able to stop them if we utterly destroy them. So I'm gonna find out those secrets. He essentially gives the uh Powell speech. What's his face? Powell, the
Colin Powell, the Secretary of
yeah,
State.
there are known knowns and known unknowns. He essentially, this is years prior, and he gives the known unknown speech before trying to go to war with someone.
They have weapons of dark side destruction in their arsenal.
God, this whole thing. We need to go back and do this whole thing again, but view this as an Iraq War prelude.
Well, if we ever do that, then we also got to do Outbound Flight.
Yeah, and there's also, I guess, Gulf War had happened, but that wasn't really connected to that.
No, but we were still hating on Iraq during the '90s. So,
well, yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's like, yeah, we had the prelude to that, though it wasn't about weapons of mass destruction. But yeah, I mean, he's grieving and he's upset, and he feels like he was weak. It definitely works, though, like getting him to that point. My only doubt is with, I think the other Jedi are a little too lenient on him.
yeah.
But I mean, there's some really interesting philosophical stuff and religious stuff going on there.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like at the same time, there's also an element of, I mean, guys, you gotta like clean your own house first. You have to clean up your own backyard first or whatever. You can't you can't just let your guys go evil and be like, well, this is the thing they have to deal with. Yeah, it's his choice.
Yes. Yeah. It's this. I mean, this is why the Jedi need to get rules, right? Because this is like, you come up with this plan, you should get shot down. Not shot. Well, already shot down. It's like, we should like keep an eye on this guy, right? Like, this is
if
bad
your
idea.
Teenage disaffected kid steals your gun and goes to school, are you going to say, well, he might not do it, and this is a mistake he has to make? No, that is horrifying. You beat him up and you lock him in a room.
Or get him some therapy too.
After you have locked him in a room without any weapons. Yes. You do not say, well, this is a mistake he has to make.
No, and he says it like in front of Master Arca. Like, I'm sorry, like Master Arca, he's your Padawan, I think.
Well, he has to say it in front of Arca. Arca dies.
Oh, that's right. It's after Arca. Right.
Yeah, well, you're right, though. He does, actually. Yeah, he has that initial thing of, yeah, we'll infiltrate. Though I don't think he pins it as, I'm going to go alone. And then when Arca dies, yeah, he definitely does it.
That's true. It's interesting because, like, I think back to Luke in Dark Empire doing this. And while Luke's certainly a lot more blunt, like, kind of in the moment, you can at least make the argument that it's in the moment. It's still not a good idea, but at least he's not like actually telling Han and Leia, "I'm going to do this because I know the Emperor's alive." Like, he finds out that moment.
Doesn't the Emperor also makes the offer, right?
More or less, yeah. Like, he's like, "Become my apprentice," and
do so thing. It's like, both guys know that the other is going to be working against them, and they know that the other knows that. Like it's a
Oh yeah.
it's a fight. It's like an actual. It's a they're aware, and Luke is the only one who can do that. It's an opening that Palpatine is making on purpose, and Luke knows he's making. And it's like, but I can overcome it. It's not like Luke just like knows that the Empire exists still and goes and like signs up for like Pelion's Imperial troops.
Yeah.
He doesn't join the Stormtrooper Academy or whatever.
No, and that's true. Like even though Palpatine making decisions like, yes, Luke, you are my new supreme commander. Here is the world devastators. I totally trust you with this. I know nothing wrong will happen. Totally, I know something good to happen. But I'm just like, I feel like in some ways, like I think it makes sense because like it's almost like it's a battle of wills with this, right? Where it's like Luke thinks he's a light sider enough to handle it, and Palpatine's like, gotta sit back and wait. I know some things will get destroyed, but that's okay. I'm gonna break this kid. Obviously, it didn't work out for Palpatine in the end, but
And I do like that in this case, there is like a hard line. No, you can't just be good enough.
right.
That doesn't work. I mean, to that initial point about this arc being really clear and thought out thematically, that's a big part of it, is the constant talk about what it actually means to take the easy path, what the dark side actually does. And look, the moral point of that gets fleshed out a lot throughout this, and it's one of the best examples of it. This and maybe the only thing that does it as well would be I think it's called Darkness. It was an arc in the Republic comics with Quinlan Voss, where Master Thome is around, and Ayla's been kidnapped by this creepy like dark side guy. That arc is, and that's an Ostrander thing. He handles it as well as Ostrander always does. But it's a similar thing to this, but this definitely shows the. I mean, the whole thing with Exar, which we should probably start talking about him after that. But like, Ulick getting a touch of the dark side, and that immediately causing all of that, and like the trick with the Sith poison is fantastic.
Yeah, I actually wondered about that because I always read that, and I'm curious what your thoughts. I always felt a little, and maybe I just reread it wrong, whereas I always felt the Sith poison, they almost blamed the Sith poison a little bit, but you have a different read, it sounds like, on the Sith poison stuff.
That's what I thought it was. That's what I always thought it was, and I sort of thought it was when it first happens. But then they have that point where, especially when like Kay is interacting with him and is witnessing his brother having just completely gone off the deep end, and they drive home at that point that he had to choose the dark side in order for any of that to work, for that to take hold. That it's hinging on Satal believing that that Ulick would on some level use the dark side, that he would be susceptible to it beyond just wanting to stop them or hating them. Like he sort of gets his revenge in that way.
Right.
And I mean the whole like some things cannot be forgiven, some crimes deserve don't just some crimes deserve the justice of hatred. And Sasal's like laughing, like, hey, yeah, which is a nice little Sith moment. Like he's getting his butt kicked, but he something like waves of anger wash over Ulick, obliterating all thought. And then a sensation he's never felt before, fire creeping through his veins, merging with the anger that consumes him. The Sith poison, Jedi, the Sith poison, I've got you now. The ancient Sith were masters of alchemy. They understood how to multiply the chemistry of rage in a man's veins. It is anger. The anger ignites the Sith poison I injected you the day you arrive. You'll see. And it's like that point about them playing on like the existing chemistry within the blood, which I love that with the Sith alchemy we have some actual alchemy stuff with the like bad bloods stuff. With like
Mm-hmm.
with all that stuff. And so it is like he has, it's amplifying what's already not only what's already there, but it's kind of just making things hurt, or just making him more angry. It's interesting. It kind of it's not the same thing, and I think it's better in The Force Awakens, but that moment in The Force Awakens that I just absolutely love, where
Mm-hmm.
Kylo starts hitting his wounded like
Right.
leg and
Yeah.
hip to
Uh-huh.
like you can see he's bleeding. He just starts pounding his own wound to make it hurt more, to hype himself up to fight.
Get the anger, get the blood flowing, get the anger going. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Um, I also really find interesting with Ulick. And I'm going to be talking about Dark Empire a lot because there's a lot of parallels, obviously, between the Ulick and Luke and Dark Empire, of of just the corroding dark side nature, which I brought up a lot of times, of how it is very much like a drug, which Luke has always talked about the dark side of drug.
Mm-hmm.
And this feels like it as well, because like it's not mind control, although sometimes it kind of feels that way. But obviously Luke is still doing his own actions, but it does feel like you can tell like his brain is just like kind of it's getting more and more warped as he's giving into it, right? Like it is almost like the dark side is quote unquote taking control. Kind of like with Luke in some ways, like it's one of those weird things where you kind of have to balance. I think you got to be really careful with this stuff, where it's like you don't want to like say, "Oh, he was just mind controlled the whole time," which is not technically true. But there is almost that element of kind of mind control, like you're definitely on a drug. And obviously people like Palpatine are gonna use that to their advantage. But what do you think? Do you think it's like it had that kind of have in terms of like not mind control, but kind of mind control, and just the way this corruption is being portrayed?
I mean, I guess you gotta look at it from the perspective, like chemically, of how a drug works and how addiction is,
Right.
because that is literally changing sometimes the chemical makeup of your mind.
Right.
Just addiction in general, endorphins, all of that
Hmm.
brain chemistry. How
Hmm.
much do we want to, you know, how much control does the consciousness have over the brain itself,
Hmm.
and all of that? It is sort of
Yeah.
because of the it is the addiction, and that is part of the person. It doesn't necessarily make them weak or evil. It depends on the thing that you're doing or whatever. But
Right.
there's a lot of trouble with if you take the metaphor too far.
Mhm.
But I think when it's treated as not just the allure or it makes you crazy, but like it gives you this response. It gives you this sense of power or freedom, or alleviates pain, and then you need more. And it's not just sort of the generic sense of what a drug is or whatever. It's more true to how people talk about addiction and sort of not being able to function after a certain point.
Mhm.
I mean, that's one of the great things Stover does in the Revenge of the Sith novelization, is Anakin sort of blaming that, his evil stuff on the dragon, as he
Right.
goes on Darth Vader, and you get all this description of like this feeling invincible, and it's wonderfully done. And
Mhm.
then the high, and it's like very obviously, compared to a high, falls, and he goes into withdrawal when he's lying on the uh you know coal or whatever burning, and was being repaired on Coruscant.
Right. And speaking of Revenge of the Sith novelization, it's interesting again because I feel like Veitch in some ways, and I feel like Tales of the Jedi is unintentionally doing this. And I mean, it is unintentionally trying to make the prequels, but you can't make the prequels because George said no at the time. Um, because I do feel like, and I remember some of the early drafts of Revenge of the Sith. Wasn't Anakin's fall a lot more of this academic style kind of thing before it became a little bit more, oh, I gotta save the woman I love kind of a situation? I always felt that,
Yeah, there's a
Anakin's
lot.
fall was
I mean, some of that I think was even filmed as well, like because Spielberg had Lucas told Lucas to cut a bunch of stuff as well as also put more emphasis more than anything
right.
on the emotional side of it because the film was just going too long. They were going to have to cut some stuff, and if you didn't really overemphasize the emotional Padme stuff,
Hmm.
you're going to have to cut stuff anyways. You're going to lose the context, and so it's going to be too quick. So you might as well overdo it on the dramatic tragedy stuff, so that the audience can at least get a decent sense of when he's falling. Uh,
Right. Uh, and I always do kind of wonder if, like, maybe in like even before Revenge of the Sith, there was always like maybe an idea of like this is how Anakin fell. He fell because he got really interested in the dark side for whatever reason, maybe to end the Clone Wars. I don't know. And then
we
the
definitely
road,
get that in TCW.
yeah, uh, the road to hell paved with good intentions. Because obviously, again, as we've said many times, Ulick is an Anakin prototype, and even to
Hmm.
the point where Ulick and Anakin have actually interacted, which is I always thought really cool. So yeah, that's just like one of those things where it's sort of like it's kind of cool seeing these early attempts of a fall to the dark side. Really, our first, I guess. No, I mean, no. Technically, I kept the Dark Empire, and technically, I guess Jedi Academy showed some falls to the dark side. So,
Oh
eh.
yeah, if you want to talk about taking away the agency of the person when they do the thing,
Oh yeah, I
or how
heard.
much agency, the eternal debates about Kip Duron.
I've heard those debates. I've never read Jedi Academy, so I can't really attest to how well or unwell it does. But it does seem like a little bit of like, it seems like people use. Oh, he was mind controlled by Exar Kun when he did all that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it is Stackpole really didn't like the way that turned out, and
Right.
so in iJedi he sort of
Mhm.
constructs the defense of Kip
Mhm.
as a like to make a counter argument to,
Mhm.
and his argument for Kip that he doesn't believe and he's trying to create as an argument against is sort of the is where more of the oh he was just mind controlled stuff comes from.
Mhm.
Like he has like the way Luke argues with Corrin is in a way that sort of hurts Kip in the future when people run with that more than the events of Jedi Academy, but also Jedi Academy just doesn't talk about it at a certain point.
Right. I mean, it reminds me a little bit of like a better version of that. Not to get too much on Jedi Academy, but this is what I thought of. Um, our friend Ian from the Greek Gentleman that brought up Parallax from the Green
Mm,
Lantern, where it's not like Hal Jordan was mind controlled by Parallax, but Parallax was kind of in the ears, like doing like do it, like a Palpatine kind of situation. But ultimately, still Hal doing it, so he's
yeah,
still
which
responsible. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I don't know how that story goes.
yeah, which the comic sort of which, but then they also Hal gets to continue being Green Lantern. Green Lantern. It's like if he is responsible at all, when we want to make that argument, he did a genocide.
That's true. That
What's his name, like JJ Solid or whatever, that YouTuber who does the animation like Super Friends or the old Spider-Man animations with like modern voiceover acting and does some original stuff. It's up, I think, episode 2 of his I forget, like comic book editor room or whatever, where the characters go in and get
mhm.
given assignments by a guy at a desk for like what their arcs are, and it's just him fuming essentially about modern editorial. And you get that with Hal. If like people are saying you're kind of boring, uh, like what are you gonna? Okay, what do you have for me? Oh, okay, we have a machine that will pump out a story and it takes it out. It's like it just says genocide.
Oh
He's like,
god.
what? Why? What do you mean genocide? I wouldn't do that. You're gonna have to do it. What do you mean? I don't want to do it. You're gonna something bad is gonna. I don't know. You're just gonna do it. I'm sorry. You're gonna do a genocide, Hal. And then he comes back. It's like, well, okay, wait, like, why? Do I get mind controlled or whatever? No, you just do it. You just feel bad, and it's like, yeah. But at the same time, people, with that, and this will come up even more with the Sith War stuff with Ulick's fate and what Veitch wanted. Because I'll just spoil it here, because Veitch wanted Ulick to die unrepentant.
Ooh, that's
he
cool.
wanted both Sith dark side characters to not turn back to the light side or anything like that. He was very interested. And it's interesting that Kevin J. Anderson is the one who pushed back on that and did the Redemption comic, because, of course, that's what he did with Kip. And so you get that contrast of sort of the emphasis on consequences and those different philosophies, which was how some people, including some really big fans of Hal Jordan, wanted Hal's characterization to go, of just, he killed all, he went crazy, he snapped Sinestro's neck, he murdered all the Green Lanterns, we have him butcher everyone, and it's his choice, he snaps, and it's really tragic, and it's character assassination, but it's well written pathos and everything, and he then, his soul becomes the Spectre, which works. The Spectre, it makes sense for him as the Spectre. I mean, maybe Phantom Stranger would have made more sense, since one of the origins for Phantom Stranger is that he's Judas Iscariot. But him being the Spectre and this spirit of vengeance and having to make those calls was apparently some of the best Hal Jordan stuff, and there were people who were upset when he got resurrected, because they liked the Hal Jordan who has done a genocide and is dead and is now the Spectre stuff and the redemption, but it's not exactly redemption. He's an angel of death.
It's like it almost reminds me a little of what, maybe this. It's not clearly a 1-to-1, because he's not an angel of death, but that reminds me of kind of what Ahsoka was doing with Anakin, of kind of like he's kind of atoning in the spirit realm, but he's not obviously being a spirit of death. He's just trying to get Ahsoka to get off her butt and stop moaning. Just still kind of do stuff. I can remember that a little bit.
He's the spirit of passive. He's the angel of passive aggressiveness.
I know. I love that, by the way. I love the fact that Anakin's still kind of a dick, but he's now he's a dick on the light side again. But no, that's really interesting. I did not know that about Ulick and Fate. It's interesting because they would do that with Jason Solo 30 years later. That's interesting. We'll have to do the Redemption comic. I definitely want to include that as part of the Tales of the Jedi series, just because it's part of it, and it's. I know it's kind of cool that he got to live to see it. Oh, by the way, I had some extra notes because I forgot to put them originally, because I had a few more things about Frida Nad and the ancient Sith spirits. But let's get into our second Dark Lord, our living Dark Lord, Mr. X.R. Kuhn. Oh boy, this guy. First random thought. Does he remind you of Gaston from Beauty and the Beast in the way he looks, or is it just me? I swear that's what I think of sometimes when I look at X.R. Kuhn. He got the jaw, and even the voice in the audio dramas got the kind of the
ponytail.
Got the deep kind of booming voice, but
I think it's the ponytail.
It's probably the ponytail. But
and musical number.
No one duels like X.R. Kuhn. You just need a little LeFou guy to be around him going, "You're the best, X.R. Kuhn. You're great."
He has his ambiguously gay character that we're gonna give ourselves pats on the back for including.
Well, he got the next Sith War. He's got the lion guy. He's pretty. X.R. Kuhn is great. But no, my God, this guy. How did he become a Jedi? That's my question when I see him. Oh my God, this guy is at least with Ulick, he's got that stupid naivety, but it's it's still dumb what he does, but I still can tell you at least were at first a decent person, just with some very bad judgment. This guy is oh, you were evil from day one, bloody. I mean, I don't want to like judge people like, oh, you were evil day one, but like you were totally evil from day one. Like, if anything, you found your place with the Sith. Like, this is where you should have been from day one. Because like he's arrogant from the start. Master Vodo is like he could tell him a mile away. If like Ulick and Exar are like almost like two sides of Anakin Skywalker. I feel like also. Where like you got Ulick, who is like those good moments of Anakin, where like you do see like, yeah, he might be kind of passive aggressive and jerk, but like there's some good moments. And then this XR is like Anakin without any like quote unquote good traits. This is like, I'm the best lightsaber duelist. I am the chosen one. I am the best Force user, and I'm interested in these dark side magics. And oh my god, the Jedi council. That's why they got a council, because like red flags everywhere. But yeah, Red, what do you think of XR Coon?
What's interesting to me is he isn't really trying to do evil. Like he isn't like exactly trying to harm people at any point. Like he is so detached and academic in his interests in the dark side.
Mm-hmm.
Like he is someone who, if the Friedenad uprising didn't happen, and this stuff wasn't put into the ether and like literal dark side artifacts weren't starting to float around, he probably would have just been a Jedi and been a pretty competent one, and probably done some good as like a just as a administrator or enforcer of justice or whatever, and would probably be an a-hole within the order. Like you get that with like I am more sympathetic to Mace Windu, but like the way a lot of people talk about Mace, I don't think he's similar to Mace at all in terms of like philosophy or characterization, really. But like I haven't watched Acolyte, but like how some of the characters are in that, the guy with the fake beard and stuff, maybe. Well, he's more flawed. Like
a bit like, but maybe like Vernestra in Acolyte.
Yeah, Vernestra's the better example. Yeah, exactly that. Like someone who has like a stick up their butt, but isn't necessarily evil. But that temptation is definitely there. He's such an interesting fallen Jedi character because he isn't good intentions, but he's also like he's not sadistic.
Right.
He's not like he doesn't want to take over the galaxy. He's kind of just interested.
Right. Actually, if you're comparing him to Vernestra, it'd be actually kind of interesting because, like, Vernestra, at least in the books, it didn't start out that way. She didn't have a stick up her butt. But she was a prodigy. She was like one of the youngest Jedi Knights at 16. She got a Padawan. So I almost wonder if XR is almost like a Jedi prodigy when he was young. They kind of make it seem like he is a little bit. But no, I guess you're right. Like he isn't. Oh, he gets that way later in Sith War, where he gets a little more of that over the top, kind of crazy power.
I mean, like he freaks out when he kills two guys who were trying to kill him.
Right.
Like he's pampered essentially. Like he's never like he's kind. It's kind of like Vodo pampered him a bit. Was too easy on him at times, or too proud of him. I've always viewed him as, oh god, what's the character's name? The villain from the first Kung Fu Panda.
Oh yeah, the Shen. I think his name's Shen. I know who you're talking about. It's the tiger.
Yeah.
I know who you're talking about. I feel like his name's Shen. Panda 1 villain, but
you think it's Sheaf? It's
Tai Lung,
yeah.
Right.
Yeah, he's essentially Tai Lung in a lot of ways. I mean, he doesn't have like the feeling of betrayal by his master as much, but it's really interesting how sympathetic but not at all like likable Exar is. Like he's being an idiot and he has no like redeeming qualities for why he's doing what he's doing.
Right.
But he is like when he's when Friedenad collapses the tomb on him and he's his body's broken and everything. And he's
that cover, by the way, like so broken bones. Okay, go. Sorry.
Which issue was that? That's
I think
issue
that was like
4?
issue 3. Yeah, it was
Yeah,
issue
yeah.
3. Yeah, cause I have it right here on my thing. Like his bones are bloody. It's like he got like his head's broken. It's like ugh. And like Vodo is trying to like accept death. It's okay. That's what Jedi are all about. Letting go, especially when we die, and becoming Force ghosts, because that's a thing that we do more often than not.
Yeah. I mean, Arca just disappears. But yeah, him being scared and like calling for Master Vodo uh a bunch and sort of constant like every time he goes down the dark path, he just keeps being like, "Oh, oops, no, wait, I'm sorry, I want back." Like he's
Oh yeah, I mean Frida Nad's like, dude, you've been one of us for a while now.
yeah,
Stop lying to yourself. And then when
like
he,
Exar is just kind of pathetic in a lot of ways.
yeah,
Uh,
I think
Go
that's
ahead.
no, I think that's what kind of makes him like the true Sith master because like all the bombats, like, no, this dude's just sad. Like most Sith masters are just sad.
Hmm. Yeah, you
Um,
literally one panel. No, no. All right, yes, I accept. It's like, dang, but yeah, like you don't feel it yet. Oh, I accept. You're lying, and he finally accepts. And it's like, yeah, the fact that it's easier for Ulik to fall to the dark side than Exar when Exar has all the like personality traits of a Sith is interesting.
yeah, I mean, I guess don't judge where evil comes from, right? Like, you know, in George's own way, that was what he wanted to do. Was episode 1, you know, how a cute little boy becomes the Dark Lord. But also, no, you're absolutely right. Because he is kind of that stick up the butt, a little bit egotistical, kind of pampered and entitled kind of Jedi. But also, it's like he does try to do things the Jedi way. It's just really wrong. Right? Remember when he goes to Onderon and he helps out those dark side cultists who are like,
Hmm.
it's like technically they haven't done anything wrong, but at the same time, it's like, yeah, technically on principle, you should not like let the mob kill people. But this is like the equivalent of like defending people who are doing hate speech. So,
Yeah, like yeah,
oops.
Jedi should step in and say to calm down, but and that is why he does that because he still has that thing that the Grand Inquisitor talks about like the Jedi Code. It's like an itch.
Right. But he's still helping out these Darksiders who are clearly not good people. Um, I just love his journey. Like I love his journey to Korriban. It's like I love how he is like. I mean, at the beginning of this of the episode keep saying episode of the beginning of the comic, he's studying Nagisa Dao and Frieda Nad. He's just interested in this stuff. But obviously, Voto's like, yeah, you shouldn't be studying that stuff. I'll teach you what I want to teach you. Um, but also, it's again with the Jedi, I think, where they're not stopping him when they probably should, right? Like someone should be on this dude. It's like it's they're just letting you go to these ancient dark side places. That's not suspicious at all, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um,
And the panel, the Force, but I will never belong to the dark side. Like once you've accepted it, the dark side is with you forever, as it is with these great dark lords of old. Like yeah, he's and even knowing how to reach Sith and stuff like that. Which uh, let's see what that. For Freed and Dad, we should probably talk about as well. We're on the topic of Korriban.
yeah. Last time a free seat to see Frieda Nad, it's a little sad. I like Frieda Nad, but I really liked. I think this is my favorite showing of Frieda Nad in any of the stories because I think this is again Veitch kind of not caring again so much about specific sex, although again Frieda Nad is the Dark Lord of the Sith. But I think it's again, I think what Nad's doing is what Veitch like Nad is almost the physical representation of just the dark side. Him as a person doesn't matter so much as it's like I just want to spread the dark side to everybody, So hey, some fallen Jedi, epic. Some weird aristocrats who have magic powers, epic. Dark side everywhere. Then maybe I can get a body and I can join in the fun. Um,
But what's great is he kind of falls into the rule of two thing
right.
because pass, uh, he thinks he can be partners with Exar Kun, or maybe he does just plan to kill Exar. Maybe he plans to take his body, but Exar taking him out, like Nad wants to spread the dark side, but he also sees that as having to belong with him. It's essentially what Plagueis, what Palpatine accuses Plagueis of plotting all of these things to further the dark side and the Sith, but he couldn't conceive of himself not being a part of it. And
No,
Nad does the same thing.
like you're right. You made a galaxy, you made room for everything, but not yourself. I forget how that line goes. But yeah, no, exactly. Because I do, because I kind of like when I read this, every time I read this at first, I'm always like, what is your goal here, Nat? Is it just to get a body? Is it to resurrect the Dark Lords of the Sith? And I think it's a mix of everything. And then he kind of just like, oh, whoops, he was juggling too many balls, and it's all kind of collapsed on him. It's like, oh shoot. And then the last thing
Also, I love the panels with the lightsaber moving towards Exar when he's getting attacked by that dog thing.
What are those
Exar
dog
Kun.
things, by the way?
It looks like it looks like a set animal,
right.
like the set dog from the Egyptian god, which is I'm not going to get into that. It's a whole fascinating thing, but there's the dog that represents the god Set, and it's a debate historically if it's based on an actual animal that's extinct, if it's a mythological animal that we just don't have a specific thing for, if it's an amalgam. It's a fascinating topic. But it's what you have the Egyptian stuff here, even before the later stuff that
Right.
makes it way more obvious.
Oh yeah.
The like Exar Kun has only one option. He's taken that option before, and each time he has taken it, it's taken it more easily, with more confidence. He takes it now, the power of anger. A river of rage flows unimpeded through Exar Kun and easily demolishes the Tomb Guardians. As the last Guardian dies, and yeah, so Free
Right.
Nad. Oh yeah, the mummified Sith say he is ready. He's like, hey, they approve. Get your ship.
Let's go.
Oh, and
Yeah.
that's where the unlike you, I will never be seduced to the dark side. Oh, but you already have. You already have.
I mean, yeah, no, he's right. Like that's the denialism of Exar Kun for you. One thing
I'm
I
just
also
built different.
exactly, I'm built different. I can handle the dark side. That's what they all say. Another thing about Nad that I really like, and I think this is the last time we really get into this in the Sis is like, Nad. I think Nad, Xr, Ulik, they're all kind of the Sith returning to those roots again, right? Like Nad's a fallen Jedi who claimed to be a Dark Lord, and now he's kind of bringing the Sith back to those ancient times of like the Sith Dark Lords are the fallen Jedi. Obviously, there's no Sith species as we know of.
Well, the Masasi, but they're
Yeah, that's true.
what they are now.
That's true. That's true. Uh, uh, I know backtracking a little bit to the world building, but I just remembered this because again, this also sets up stuff with kind of how the Great Hyperspace War would end. Because like I have it here. Let's see. Moving on. Let's see. Blah blah blah. There we go. It says this is the moment of conceived a long forgotten time when the Sith were a mighty race of magicians, a time when the Sith people were being driven to extinction by the Jedi Knights and the armies of the Galactic Republic. How do you feel about that line? Because I know that's something you weren't a big fan of when the Tor timeline came up of like, oh, the Jedi genocided the Sith species, and that's why they're all pissed. Well, one of the
it's definitely different here because
Mhm.
here it's like there's a constant.
Mhm.
It's obvious here that the Jedi and Sith didn't just find out about each other for the first time ever,
Right.
and within a month fight each other and then destroy the Sith.
Right.
Like the Great Hyperspace War, my complaint was always that it was so quick, and you can kind of see here that it was that was sort of stapled onto the existing lore from this. That it's, I mean, heck, here we get the first appearance of what turns out to be Marco Ragnos.
Right.
He's the ancient Sith Lord at the end, who talks to Exar, and Ulik with that holocron, which we'll get to. That's an interesting thing.
Right.
But the obvious idea there, I mean, Marco Ragnos is dead by the time Dark Lords of the Sith or the Golden Age of the Sith begins.
Mm-hmm.
But here it's much more. There's generations of fighting between these two, and the Sith sort of go extinct gradually, it seems, and because of a civil war that tears them apart, which seems to be more of a proper civil war, not just a conflict between Ludo Kresh and Naga Sadow, which
Right.
some of the prelude or like timeline stuff for Tor does drive home. Like there is, they kind of do that with Vitiate, with having him sort of play them. There's that guy who's doing like Sith suicide attacks, like destroying intentionally the Sith and essentially forcing it to be like a continuation war, kind of doing the German, like, what were those called? Those like emergency brigades with like the kids and the like
the Volkstorm. The Volkstorm.
That were like mixture of like Luftwaffe personnel, children, and then like Waffen SS.
Mm-hmm. No, the Volkstorm. Yeah. What's interesting, and I actually have it here on the forums, is there's some stuff from the Tales of the Jedi source book, which came out before, I think, Dark Lords, and it actually has something very interesting. I'll read a little bit about. It's about Frida Nad, which I think is really interesting. I think it really ties into the idea of like, yeah, the Sith extinction was a lot longer. It says here, Nad became proficient in the dark side Sith magic. He could not progress, however, because the reigning Dark Lord was still young, and the Sith had declared that only one Dark Lord could rule at any time. Frustrated, Nad rebelled against the Sith, fleeing to Yavin 4. He trained there by the ancient spirit of Naga Sadow. When he felt strong enough, Nad destroyed Sadow's spirit and set out to become the next Sith Lord. Brought the power of the dark side to Onderon, blah, 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 blah. So yeah, that's interesting that source book hints that even in Nad's time, there was a Dark Lord of the Sith.
Yeah, that is, looking at Arca Jeth from, it seems to be from the audio drama, saying Frida Nad was seduced by the dark side. He apprenticed himself to a Dark Lord of the Sith after his death. So I had always read that idea as like to like a ghost.
Right. To the ghost of Naga Sadow. Oh, Red.
He was a member of the Jedi Order.
Right. That's true. He was a Jedi, and then he got all like, I want to like. He's basically the Exar Kun of his time.
Yeah. He fled Ossus and made his way to the heart of the old Sith Empire. He eventually followed the Force to the jungle moon of Yavin 4, where he found and apprenticed himself to the ancient Dark Lord Naga Sadow. Sadow trained Nad. So, I guess that was something that changed around.
There was Naga Sadow being quote unquote the Dark Lord definitely is something that changed, and they kind of moved forward with that. Because like you said, in this book at least, it does seem like the Great Hyperspace War wasn't just the Jedi and the Sith that found each other, and then the Sith are gone. Hooray! It's like it does seem like the Sith kind of just died out, like they normally do, because they hate each other and they can't. That's what happens. What happens, Sith Lords? But no, I always found that very interesting as well. I think that's sort of just the direction, sadly. But I don't want to say sadly, but it's like I do think when Kevin J. Anderson kind of went on his own, he kind of changed a little bit of the original orientations of some of these things.
I think it already changes here, because if that's pre Dark Lords of the Sith, here it's established as Naga Sadow being the one who trained him, and it's implied that he destroys Naga Sadow's spirit.
Right.
because he definitely went to Yavin 4.
Right.
So why necessarily would he do that if the Sith Empire was still around? So I think that was like midpoint in the continuity for the Sith.
Right. Speaking of this again, what did you think of seeing Yavin 4 in this storyline? And I think this is no, because Jedi Academy came out. But what do you think of like seeing the origins of, maybe not the origins, but definitely seeing the Masasi temples and uh, the Masasi themselves?
They didn't look as similar to the films as I would have liked. I think the ending of Fall of the Sith Empire
Mm-hmm.
does a nice job of like it's very obviously those temples. These look pretty different, which is kind of a missed opportunity. At the same time, it is funny just considering the state of modern Star Wars comics
Mm-hmm.
that you have what is very obviously meant to be a movie planet, and like the Temple of Fire is definitely not one in the movies.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think so because of just how its construction is and like the size, and he digs out the entire bottom. Uh, but still, the fact that you have this place that is directly from the movies, a location and structure that is literally in the movies,
Mm-hmm.
and the artist chooses to draw it themselves and deviate and get creative to the point of it honestly being a detriment. That is so different from the state of Star Wars comics today,
Oh, totally.
where it's like we need something completely original. How about we just like literally just trace like from the film? Hey, it's not Yavin 4. I don't care. Yeah, but we're just gonna have like literally a JPEG of Yavin 4 with some paint on it.
Make the sky different color.
Mm-hmm.
No, you're right. I mean, it's certainly not. It's certainly kind of weird. I mean, yeah, even the temples. Like, I'm not even quite sure. Like, what temple did Luke? Was the rebel based on? Was it? Is it the one we're going to see in the Sith War, or is it like, I'm not even quite sure which temple the rebels are even in? Like, is it one that Naga Sadao built, or is it one Exar Kun built?
Yeah, you're right though, because he is building more temples at the end with having the Masasi do it. I mean, I think like the cover for the first issue of Dark Lords of the Sith, the like Yavin 4 background there looks a lot like the movie.
Yeah, I just love the fact that the rebels are in a Sith temple. It's like Ghost or Exar Kun just haunting them, watching as the rebels do their thing. Uh
He sure took his time.
that's true.
Like he could have
5,000.
been like grooming Ezra the entire period. Well, Ezra was only there briefly, but
And Luke.
was that a theory that we had going into season 3? I can't remember. Maybe
Uh,
season 4.
Maybe. I mean, I feel like we might have let this go. That would have been fun. Um,
I think that was in the tally for like what we were debating would happen.
I mean, the fact that I mean, no, I thought it was a great. I mean, the good thing Frida Nad's spirit was dead because, like, Saw probably got hid in a Frida Nad tomb during his time on the run before he got out of there, before he got out of Dodge. Um, but no, that was cool. I love seeing Yavin and the kind of the gladiatory arena with the giant Sith worm. That was all cool. More or less, it more or less lines up with everything with the with the tour timeline stuff, which is always fun to go back to. And it's cool also kind of seeing. I guess my question is, how did you feel about Exar Kun? The brief moment we get of him as a Dark Lord. We'll obviously talk about more Dark Lord in Sith War, but do you think that how did you feel like after he became like the Dark Lord of the Sith, like just his personality and stuff and his characterization?
I like that he's sort of still on the back foot for a bit.
Mm-hmm.
Like it takes like getting Naga Sadow's stuff. Like he kills Free Nad kind of prematurely. Uh,
Yeah.
to the point that it takes him a while to realize that there's the ship underneath the temple. But it's neat how
Mm-hmm.
he kind of doesn't have a plan for like domination or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
He's just like, I guess I'm gonna follow the other dark side stuff. Like he needs to take care of the competition first.
Mm-hmm.
Uh it's sort of just, well, I am entitled to this. Like, he doesn't necessarily want to rule the galaxy, but he's like, well, I guess I'm going to now
I
because
guess
I am the best.
it's interesting. I've always felt. I mean, obviously, I think the Sith ruling the galaxy is like wanting to rule the galaxy is like not it's obviously kind of a no brainer. It's like they're all about the power, but it's always interesting seeing Sith lords who that's not their primary goal at first. Um, I've always found it interesting. This is kind of the one thing I kind of agree with like Tapcaf a little bit in terms of maybe the Bane stuff is that I think Bane was a little too. We gotta rule the galaxy to bring order. I almost like the idea of what Sith wanting to rule the galaxy almost being more of a less of a plan that they always have, and more just like it depends on the personality. Like some Sith are more like Frieda and Nad, who are like cool with their little kingdom planets, and then and then I think by the time you get to like the Plagueuses and Palpatines, like when they're like that's more their galactic thing, but that's also because like Palpatine's like he's a noble. He is a he could be a senator one day. So like yeah, of course he's gonna want to rule the galaxy because he's in those intergalactic affairs, and Hugo Damask is a banker who
Yeah, what's the thing he says to Hugo Damask when they first
Palpatine.
meet? Yeah, of like
I don't remember because it's like I just know he talks about like he was a racer and then he crashed his car and then
he says because there's a thing where Plagueis says like, "Oh, I'm hundreds of years old" or whatever.
Mhm.
He's like, where do you think you'll be or whatever? And Palpatine says like, "I'll be Chancellor." He's like, "Do you have political ambitions?" No, but I'll be Chancellor. Like he
Right.
already knows he's just gonna. If it's like, "Oh, I've known many people" or whatever, and he's like, yeah, but nobody as great as me. Like I'm gonna be the best. But so I
Right.
think part of that domination stuff comes from the dark side needs people suffering to play off of. So you kind of have to keep invading, destroying stuff.
Right. No, I agree. I'm not saying it's like Sith wanting to rule the galaxy doesn't make sense. No, it makes sense. I just think it's interesting. Like you have an Exar Kun who's kind of like, I'm the Dark
Or I mean, it's like
Lord.
even less.
Okay. Yeah, but like I'm the Dark
Mhm.
Lord and I'm the best,
Yeah,
but
but I think like what you say with like Exar
I don't know what to do.
seems to do that. Seems to switch over to okay. I guess I'm gonna have to conquer immediately. It almost seems like yeah, like because like he's not interested in ruling necessarily, but he understands that it's the necessity of
The Dark
his power and keeping his power. And
Right.
so it's like he doesn't necessarily have a design for the galaxy like Palpatine did. Exarch doesn't really. A lot of them I don't think do. They're just sort of like it would be neat, or it's something that would be useful for their own personal power and enjoyment.
Well, Palpatine's weird because he did at the same time he also was like he became emperor and then it's like you do you Tarkin just as long as I'm in power you can do kind of whatever you want. Like he got lazy. And
He
now
wanted
to
to be
become
immortal.
that's true. Now to become God and let Tarkin and the inner council deal with like the boring political cabinet meetings. Um,
I mean, remember what Vitiate tries to do? Vitiate's like,
that's
I'm gonna
true.
make myself a god. I'm gonna leave this galaxy,
Then I'm gonna
and
be a
he even
farmer.
says like, yeah, exactly. He's like, I can be that. I can go to I can be a farmer. I can be a benevolent god. I can destroy entire. Like he wants to go and be like a benevolent god for 1 billion years, and then destroy that universe, and then go to another one and be a farmer, and then go to another one and just like destroy that.
I find it funny the farmer thing because now I'm just imagining the end of Infinity War, but with Vitiate like on the little farm. Just looks out in the sun. It's like, I did it. I snapped it. I completed my task. But no, yeah, right. I think that's funny. And it kind of gets there eventually when he finally falls. But let's uh I also find it funny. I also find it funny. Like, yeah, he did kill Nad too quickly, which is something that a lot of Sith apprentices always do. Like, they kill their masters too quickly. Like, Palpatine probably was better off leaving Plagueis alive. Um, Vader wasn't getting anything though out of Palpatine, but like they kill their masters too fast, and a lot of information is lost forever. Unfortunately, that's the Sith for you. Um, But I guess let's talk about as we kind of near the end. Let's talk about the final panel, and I call them the ancient Sith spirits of evil. Because I love that scene. I think that's honestly my favorite moment in the comic. Just seeing the ancient Sith Dark Lords be like, hey, you guys are going to continue our legacy. You guys are the continuation of the Sith as a belief. You are the chosen. Now we were the chosen. Now be the chosen. Because of you, the Sith will never die. And I think it's really cool. It's especially kind of cool in the context even of Tor, where they're like, the ancient Sith spirits are around, but even they're like, nah, we don't like this vicious guy. You, Exar Kun and Ulik, are almost like more Sith than that guy is. But what do you make of the final moment and the talismans coming together and summoning the Sith and almost creating the rule of two?
It's neat that the Sith have these sort of contingencies, like even as they're collapsing and you can see like Jedi fighters above them. Marco Ragnos is concerned with the like it doesn't matter that his Sith purebloods are, I mean, these are two humans. I mean, he can't see them necessarily. Well, maybe he can actually. But like he doesn't care about the specifics. Clearly the Sith Empire is gone by the time this stuff is going to be used.
Right.
It's about continuing the dark side and like this greater idea of the Sith, which sort of plays with Marco Ragnos's stuff at the when his ghost shows up at his funeral procession.
It's
and he
interesting though
says
that
like
Ragnos
you
looks
gotta
human
do.
in this.
Yeah, it's weird that I don't know why that was.
My guess is I guess it's kind of the Kevin J. Anderson kind of going a little bit in a different direction, where it's like Dark Lords can be Sith hybrids. While here it does feel like Dark Lords are just fallen Jedi.
Yeah, he clearly is like just a Jedi, like a Dark Jedi human.
Right. With the cool horned helmet. You of the future, hear me well. These two amulets are joined. The time is upon us. You have chosen. Now you are the chosen. And then he puts little bird mark tattoos on his head, and then XR and Ulik claps hands, and he's like, what's interesting in the audio drama of this scene though, and this is something I always found kind of funny, is like, XR says, we were brothers as Jedi. Now let's be brothers as Dark Jedi. I always find the interplay between Dark Jedi, and Sith kind of fascinating. I wonder what your thoughts on that are in terms of this comic.
Yeah, it's interesting that Dark Jedi sort of is a point of pride almost for like they've conquered the Sith, and the Sith is sort of for them not the species but like the domination, like that's their political entity or their like proof of how strong they are. While them being Jedi specifically is still a point of pride because they can never get over being kicked out in the first place, and it's just always about that.
Right. It's actually kind of interesting when you look at the Sith later on, especially in like later prequel stuff. You could almost argue, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this, that Dooku and later Vader, did not mean to make that joke, are almost like back to the Sith in their roots, right? Like they are fallen Jedi. While Palpatine was never a Jedi, he's just some aristocrat that Plagueis found. Plagueis again was a quasi experiment. I don't know what Tenebrous was. I don't think he was anything. And then Bane, and like in a weird way, Bane was never a fallen Jedi as well. He just kind of found the Sith one day and then got really good at it. I've always found that cycle interesting.
Yeah, though I think, I mean, people argue like Dooku's not exactly a Sith, and I think it is fair to say that like Dooku and Vader are not necessarily true believers in a lot of ways. Like they're still sort of hung up on their obsessions as Jedi.
Right.
Whereas, you have this actual like break from that. Interestingly though, Crate kind of proves as a synthesis because he was a fallen Jedi, but he is also way more Sith-like and way more fixated on just the evil stuff.
Right. I know. I understand that because, like, all of Palpatine's apprentices, in one way or another, are kind of not the best, or like probably would not make good Sith masters. Mel was an attack dog. Dooku was never meant to be anything. And Vader, maybe. I mean, Palpatine had some high hopes, but then Vader got burned.
I mean, look
Uh,
at their apprentices that they did have. Dooku had what? Ventress and Oppress?
that's true.
He let a guy named Savage Oppress be his apprentice and thought this wasn't a trap by Mother Talzin after he killed the previous one she sent him. He just
Yeah,
thought that would work out. And then Vader has what? Freaking Lumaya?
that's true. She tries with Jason Solo, and even Jason Solo. I mean, I've never read those books, so like, I can't really attest to any of it. So I always want to be careful where I make claims to stuff. But it does sound like even Jason Solo was like not really interested in being a Sith Lord so much as like, I need to use the dark side for some very specific reasons, but I'm still going to take the mantle anyway because
Yeah, and
reasons.
there's also debate, like even in the books themselves, I think, of Lumaya. Like Lumaya is not exactly a Sith. Or she doesn't. She claims herself the Dark Lady of the Sith. She's she is not, which is kind of funny and very Sith-like to just be like, no, no, this is mine now. I didn't actually do the proper rule of two thing, but we're totally continuing the rule of two.
Yeah,
I get a mulligan.
Carter Jax is totally a Sith Lord because of it retroactively.
Yeah, and he
Uh
honestly was more successful than Maya was.
that is true. He probably would have made a better Sith Lord. But no, I think again, I like this. I like it. I like what this book kind of makes us question, like, what are the Sith and what are the, like, like in KOTOR 2 and Tor, it's like even Krea's like, you thought the fallen Jedi were the Sith? Like, nah, the Sith are out there in the dark. Like, I don't even like. I think even Krei herself is like, I don't consider myself a Sith. I might call myself Darth Treya, but like, am I a Sith really? Maybe, maybe not. Were Scion and Nihilus really Sith? No, I think they kind of were. But you know what I mean, right? Like, it's sort of like, who really gets to claim the mantle. I get to go back to Tor and kind of the week in Star Wars that we talked about. What are your thoughts on looking at this from the viewpoint of Tor, of like the ancient Sith said Exar Kun and like, you are Sith, but like that Vitiate guy, he's no Sith. Like, we don't like him. What are your thoughts on that?
On what specifically?
On just like, when you kind of look at this book in the reference to Tor, the ancient Sith supporting Exar over Vitiate. I'm just kind of curious.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're trying to secure their legacy.
Mm-hmm.
And Vitiate is letting the Sith collapse in order to preserve his own little base of power,
That's true.
instead of these guys emerge and fall to the dark side because of the machinations of the dark side and some individual fallen Jedi.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas Vitiate is much more political, much more part of that like aristocracy or existing Sith infrastructure,
Right.
which proves to be his downfall.
Right. It's interesting also looking at that's Vitiate's all about himself, and it reminds me a little. It's always interesting when you see Sith Lords who are both, all about themselves, but also kind of like about the cause. And it's almost interesting because I always think of this line from Revenge of the Sith. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this line as well, where I always think of Palpatine as someone who, like, at the end of the day, cares about himself. It's all about me, me, me. And I'm sure it still is. But there's this one line in Revenge of the Sith where you almost get the sense that Palpatine cares about the cause. And it's when he's dueling Yoda, and he goes, like, you will not stop me. Darth Vader will become more powerful than either of us. And you get that one line almost makes you think that, even though, yeah, we know Palpatine's gonna try the immortality thing and live forever, it's almost like for a brief second Palpatine's like, oh, Vader's gonna rule to me one day, but oh man, my legacy is gonna be I create the best Sith Lord ever. That's my legacy to the galaxy. I'm curious, like, to hear your thoughts on just that moment in
I
terms
mean,
of.
I think he definitely believes in the Sith ideology, and so
Mhm.
yeah, he will keep trying to keep himself immortal because every Sith in the Rule of Two has to.
Right.
Bane fights until the very end. He tries to do essence transfer and stuff.
Hmm.
You know, if his ultimate Grand Apprentice cannot beat him, then he has failed as a master because he hasn't picked the right apprentice.
Right.
Kind of still believes in that. You know, all the stuff he does with his machinations and even in coming back again and again as clones. Like,
Hmm.
yeah, he wants to live forever, but in that forever, he is always going to be pushing for someone who will be strong enough to destroy him. But they have to destroy him while he is actively willing to destroy them.
Right.
It's
Um.
that nihilistic, like if he's going to be destroyed, then then I deserve it. Yeah, thing.
No. Right. I'm curious reading this comic though, if that is what XR and Ulik think that they have to do, or is it sort of like, because I always, because this is the pre rule of two technically, even though there's technically rule of two, and obviously XR does rule of two Freed and Nad almost by happenstance. But I do wonder if at first they're like almost doing like what Plagueis thought he was gonna do, but failed to do, where it's like we'll be both Dark Lords, equal partners, and we kind of see that in the next arc. Do
Well, I
you?
mean, part of why Bane wipes out all the Sith in order to create the Rule of Two
Right.
is because he understands that even if he restores strength and like the actual Sith beliefs as he sees them to the Sith of his era,
Hmm.
they're just gonna all wipe each other out again. That
Right.
like if every Sith in the Brotherhood of Darkness became another Bane with his exact beliefs, then they're all just gonna destroy each other.
That's true. Yeah, you're probably
Because the
right.
Sith are gonna do this regardless. And so like yeah, Ulik and
Mm.
Exar they kinda know, oh, we're probably gonna betray each other, like Ludo Kresh and Nagisa Dao.
Mhm.
It's they're gonna pull that stuff one way or another. I mean, Freenad is implied to destroy Narcisadal's ghost. Exar does that to Narcisadal. It doesn't have to be part of a structured thing for them. It's sort of the inevitable, which is where Bane even gets the idea from in the first place, from Revan and Malik specifically, from talking to just talk to Revan's holocron or Malik's, I forget.
I think it's Revan. I think
Yeah,
talks to Revan.
it's Revan. Uh, yeah, he gets all of that
Right.
idea from witnessing, which plays into that rule of two implication that you get with Maul and Ezra with the opening the temple doors. Where it's like, oh, there have to be the master and the apprentice, and some people are confused by that, but it's like it's not that strange. That's always kind of an important interplay, even when there's 1,000 Sith.
No, yeah, I agree with that. I never thought like even like every says master got to have at least one apprentice. Um, did you think Ulik joined XR a little too quickly after he got told by the ancient Sith, or do you think Ulik was like, well, if these ghosts are telling me, I probably should do it? Like, you think it made sense at that point for Ulik to be like, okay, you're my master now, XR, teach me the
Well, I mean,
ways.
his whole thing was taking down the greater darkness beyond the Craft cult,
It's true.
and now here comes the literal ancient Sith saying that, and so he's like, "Well, I guess I'm going to have to, follow through with what Friednad predicted for me."
Right, you will be one of the great ones. Yeah,
I can't believe Friednad said you're one of the good ones. Racist.
I know. Racist. But yeah, I think we're kind of running out of stuff to talk about because even though this book is so dense. So, any last points?
Silvar is
Oh,
important moving
oh,
forward. This is the
yes,
introduction of the Cathars as well. But
right,
yeah, Silvar will be an important character moving forward, one of the leads in the series, especially in Redemption. But
right.
yeah, beyond
Any
more Jedi lore,
I guess any critiques of the comic itself? I mean, we kind of gushed about it. Like any small little things that you kind of wish, like, oh, okay, wish seen more of that or done more of this.
not that I can really think of, honestly.
Nah, I mean, yeah. I mean, I guess we didn't talk a lot about Nomi and stuff. She kind of gets a little. She's there. Like you
Yeah,
feel like
I do like how heroic and like Nomi going in to save Ulick or getting herself out of trouble a bunch of times. Uh, really, yeah, there's a lot of character work with her as well, and getting over her husband, and also coming out of all of this stronger and a better Jedi.
right. I mean, sure. I mean, I forget. Do they hint at an Ulick Nomi kind of romantic thing, right?
Well, I mean, she says she's in love. She loves him, and then at the end, there's the whole thing of like the
Right.
door closing.
Right. Fact is like almost like it's a little Padme Anakin in there, even though I don't know those characters exist yet.
I was thinking more of the even though I hate it, and this is much better and makes more sense in my view, but kind of the end of uh the Rey Kylo stuff with Tales of the Jedi. Not Tales of the Jedi, Last Jedi. With like
That's
closing the Falcon's door.
that's true. That's true. A little bit of that. Got a little bit of that going on as well. Um, let's see. Rip Master Arca. Oh, by the
Yep.
way, we talked about him during the XR Coon stuff, but I know you're a big fan of Master Voto. You want to gush about him a little bit before we?
Yeah, he doesn't do too much here, but we get more of him being just cool. We get the force imbued bow staff, which is just awesome.
Mhm.
It's neat seeing. I mean, we get also we get Oda and Ur's first appearance here, I believe.
Oh
Or is it
yeah.
Udbanar?
Osis is the next arc, right? That's when we see Osis next. We don't. Do we see
We
it
saw
here?
Osis already in Freenet Uprising.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
But yeah, we're building more of that stuff. Uh, getting more of the establishment of the order. Uh, proper. Uh, K is fantastic. Uh, sort of just the good Jedi.
Right. He's the good brother.
The Obi-Wan figure, which will get even more of obvious because he gets the "You were my brother, Anakin," but literal.
Right. Except Obi Wan. Well, I mean, no. Actually,
Yeah,
Obi Wan at least gets a few extra years than K does. I'll
yeah,
just
but
say.
ends the same way.
Well, no, because he doesn't become a sheep. He doesn't vanish. He just dies.
Yeah, but still,
That's
he
true.
gets killed by the brother.
That's true. Although Vader didn't go. No, what have I done? Just start stepping on
Mm-hmm.
Obi Wan's shirt. I love that scene because it's like, hey, where'd you go? What's going on? I love that moment.
Yeah, what is he trying to do there?
I feel like he thought like I feel like he almost like felt like maybe like there's like a trap door or something. It's like, did you shrink Obi-Wan? Am I squishing you with my foot? Because Vader like in that moment, Vader's just like, what the heck just happened?
Yeah,
Didn't expect that. I thought I was going to see a dead sliced Obi-Wan in half. Um, but
he had
yeah,
a plaque on his wall and everything.
I
Everyone ruined it.
know. Yeah, I know. Obi-Wan ruins. It's all Obi-Wan's fault. Hope we be back. He just slammed the
Did
plaque.
Obi-Wan's lightsaber get destroyed?
That's a good question. I actually
That's so off topic, but that just came to me. It's like,
is
yeah,
it on the Death Star? Did Vader
yeah.
like, take it with him with like a
Did
trophy?
he? Dang, that's interesting.
Is it like somewhere in Vader's castle just as a trophy? Um, but I digress. But no, Tales of the Jedi, Dark Lords of the Sith, probably my favorite. Where does this rank for you in terms of the ones that you've read so far? Is it your favorite too?
Yeah, definitely the best written so far.
I agree. Um, Definitely my favorite. Probably the most depth. And now it's time for a Sith War. 1, 2, 3, 4. XR and Ulick declare a Sith War, but that will happen next time. But with that, I think we shall begin to wrap things up. So thank you everyone for joining. Thank you, Red, for joining me in this conversation. This was great. I love doing
Mm-hmm.
these. Next week I have another guest lined up where we'll be talking about the trilogies, how they're all structured as trilogies. So MS will be back in September. I think we're going to talk about depictions of the Jedi, so that's going to be fun. This book will definitely be brought up, so that will be fun. Of course, you can follow us at Ion Canon Pod, EYEONCANONPOD. Of course, you can follow me at JID 2021. Again, JID 2021. Red, can they follow you anywhere? Anywhere you think, anything you want to plug?
Not really on much that I post stuff on.
Fair enough. All right, everybody. Thank you all for joining us. Look forward to be with you, and let's blow this thing and head home.